In Iran, President Hassan Rouhani said Tehran will continue to enrich uranium. This statement comes just a couple of days after the country accepted restrictions on its nuclear program in exchange for limited relief from economic sanctions in a landmark agreement with world powers.
Our nuclear right will be operational with more strength and clarity. Even the right of enrichment, which is part of our nuclear rights, will continue. It is being continued today, it will continue tomorrow, and our enrichment will never stop. This is our red line. The enrichment in Iran will never be stopped, and this is our red line. Enrichment is our clear line, whether some tend to like it and some not.
In Egypt, hundreds of people opposed to a new protest law continued their demonstrations in downtown Cairo, despite being dispersed by police thrice. The new legislation passed on Sunday bans protests without police approval. Under the law, protests at places of worship are banned, and the Interior Ministry has the right to forbid any public meeting of more than 10 people. Human rights groups have condemned the law as a major blow to freedom in Egypt.
What we're doing here, we're standing against the real terrorists of the state, who have been ruled by the martial system, killing innocent people, arresting lawyers, arresting righteous lawyers, arresting righteous political activists in such a way that has no relationship with human rights or has no relationship with the real January 25 revolution or even the 30 June revolution.
Israeli troops killed 3 Palestinians in the West Bank, south of Hebron, claiming they were al-Qaeda-linked militants. The Palestinian Authority, which administers the territory, denied that 3 men had any relation to al-Qaeda and accused Israelis of setting out to kill the men. After this operation, the Israeli army withdrew from South Hebron area in the early hours of today. In Thailand, the anti-government protests continue. Thousands of protesters gathered today at the Democracy Monument in Bangkok before setting off on a march to various government ministries to pressure the Prime Minister into resignation. In Indonesia, demonstrators staged a rally in front of the Australian embassy demanding an apology from Australia after allegations that Canberra spied on President Yudhoyono. Fears grow over the living conditions of tens of thousands of people displaced because of sectarian violence in Central African Republic. The landlocked nation of 4.6 million people at the heart of Africa has descended into chaos since the Seleka coalition of rebels ousted President François Bozize in March. The United Nations estimates that 400,000 people have been displaced and 68,000 have fled to neighboring countries due to the spiraling violence.
These people flee toward their fields, which are in a radius of their villages anywhere from 1 to 30 kilometers. It's a very, very difficult situation for them. They're living out there without their houses, so they're not covered, not protected from the rain, not protected from the mosquitoes. They don't have access to safe drinking water. They don't have access to their normal food supply. It's extremely difficult.
Welcome to Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. Last week, the Attorney General Dominic Grieve got himself into hot water by suggesting that corruption was endemic in the British Pakistani community. Although he quickly apologised, Grieve's comments have provoked outrage, much of it coming from the ranks of his own party. Sajid Karim, Conservative MEP for North West England, rebuked Grieve in very strong language.
The British Pakistani community myself, I found these comments were ill-advised. I have personal experience of battling voter fraud going back well over a decade. At that time, the Labour government put in place lax qualification criteria for obtaining a postal vote. From that time, it is clear that Asian communities, certainly where I was a councillor, were being targeted by political activists in order to carry out mass-scale voter fraud. Rather than it is the Pakistani community that is carrying out the fraud, it was in effect certain individual political activists who were carrying out the fraud on that local community. The community was the victim rather than the perpetrator.
Although the Pakistani government has often been accused of corruption, singling out the British Pakistani community, many of whom originally left the country because of corruption, it was always going to be provocative. The controversy has also once again raised accusations of elitism and xenophobia within the Conservative Lib Dem government, and fears that the Conservative Party could be alienating a potential pool of voters and party members in an increasingly multicultural country. Well, joining me in the studio to discuss all this is Rabia Bhatti, Conservative councillor for Chesham in Buckinghamshire, Lord Nazir Ahmed, an independent peer in the House of Lords and the first Muslim peer, Atif Ali Shah from the UK branch of the Pakistan Tehreek e-Insaf, a party which often campaigns in Pakistan on an anti-corruption platform. And joining me by Skype is Mohammed Amin, Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum. Welcome to the programme. Well, Rabia Bhatti, let me begin with you. I mean, is there any basis for truth in what Dominic Grieve said, or is that just scaremongering?
I don't believe there's any truth in that whatsoever, and I totally believe that Dominic's comments have been taken out of context also. Dominic's an MP for the constituency next to me in Beaconsfield, and I know for a fact that he's worked so hard and diligently to form a relationship with the Pakistani community and indeed all Southeast Asian communities, not only in his constituency but in the constituencies around him also. Although I understand that these comments have provoked outrage and within Pakistani community and within other communities also, like I said, I do believe they've been taken out of context, and it certainly wasn't his intention to do so.
Well, Mohammed Amin, I hope you're there on Skype.
Good afternoon, Jonathan.
Yes, good afternoon. I mean, he is the Attorney General. I mean, he is somebody of great, very responsible position he holds. I mean, wasn't it extraordinary he should say something like this?
I was surprised. It was an excellent interview that he gave. It's a shame that one small part of it has been picked out, and I think it was a serious political mistake to name one particular community in a way that could be read as implying that this was a widespread community issue rather than specific individuals breaking the law.
Well, I mean, he had a chance to correct himself, because he began, I think, by saying it was South Asians or Asian community, and then the interviewer said, well, do you mean the Indians? He said, no, not the Indians, Pakistanis. So, I mean, he had many opportunities to say, you know, to get out of it at the time, didn't he?
Yes, but occasionally things do go wrong in interviews. And he apologised very quickly on Saturday afternoon, making it clear that he had no intention to cause offence. I've been shocked by people accusing Dominic Grieve of xenophobia, because I know him personally. He's nothing like that.
Well, Atif Ali Shah, I mean, there's no doubt there is corruption in Pakistan itself, and your party campaigns on platforms to try and deal with it. So is there any spillover at all from Pakistan to Britain for people who are recent immigrants from Pakistan, perhaps?
I'm afraid before, you know, I specifically point out what Dominic's statement has created a specific issue related to a segment of society within UK. There's a wider confusion within Conservative government so far, the coalition government. They cannot define the concept of community by itself. They first come up with a bigger slogan of they're going to be a big community. Then they suddenly came up the multiculturalism, and they say multiculturalism is over. It seems like there's a more to it what we see on the surface.
Well, I think we'll come on to that point. That's a very important point. We'll come on to it later. I just want to deal with the issue of Pakistani corruption in Pakistan and possible spillover. I think the corruption by itself is within the system within Pakistan. It's not the people who are corrupt. It's the system that forces corruption upon them. They are 2% of the most powerful elites supported by the Western government without any doubt. And they are forcing corruption upon 98% of the people. Over here, it's a completely different story. There's a complete system. There might be some flaws within the system, as he rightly pointed out, the MEP, that there might be some people who within the system are exploiting it for their own benefit. Certain activists are using the flaws within the system, and the system can be corrected. They cannot blame the whole system. But the way I would say that the angle given to this news is that the whole community is pushing this Britain society, Britain system towards corruption. How come a community who's less than 1% of the whole population is dominating the 99%? I think there's more to it than what we see on the surface. But I think you are putting words into his mouth. He didn't say that they were corrupting the rest of British society.
I think Daily Mail has put it exactly this way. Pakistani community is fueling corruption within Britain. And you see, when our children go to the school or when we go to the workplaces, and there are the places when you see the social impact of these statements. These statements are, I won't say it's just like it's out of context. I would say these are absolutely irresponsible of coming out of a person who's the most responsible person within Britain government.
Well, Nazir Ahmed, I mean, there has been quite a bit of corruption in Parliament, including by members of the present government, and house flipping and expenses fiddling and so on. I mean, isn't this a case of the pot calling the kettle black?
Absolutely. And let me just first of all correct you. People didn't come here because of corruption in Pakistan. People came here because Britain was bombed by the Nazis. And when they were rebuilding the industries, and many of the industries in the Midlands, in Yorkshire and lots of other places, people came here to rebuild and to work, and they've been here for a very long time. Secondly, Councillor Bhatti said that he's been taken out of context. He hasn't. He very clearly said it was the Pakistani community. So whilst Dominic Grieve, I'm not going to say anything about him personally, I think there's an endemic problem within the Conservative Party. And I know that the Conservatives will try and defend it. But let me give you an example. First of all, starting from Enoch Powell's days to directly or indirectly, I mean, even the UKIP has come out of the Conservative Party. And you know Lord Pearson's debate last week, what he was saying about Muslims. Now, it is different that over the years, they've changed the language. First, it was blacks, and then it was those foreigners, and then it was now it's Muslims, and even now it's gone to Pakistanis. So I think whilst there may be corruption in Pakistan, I'm not saying that it isn't. But then look at the selection in Falkirk, for instance. I mean, in Scotland, nobody says Scottish people and all the trade unionists are corrupt because there was huge scandal that was going on. And only 2 weeks ago, a Tory MP was claiming for his stables heating for his horses, when a lot of our old age pensioners cannot even afford. In fact, yesterday, the figures came out that more old people died because they didn't have heating and they didn't have the support. And these are human beings we are talking about. So MPs, how many MPs had to resign and how many lords even had to pay back a lot of the expenses. So if you were to sort of generalize, you could say everybody in the House of Commons or in the House of Lords is like that. Then if you look at some of the pedophilia, I mean, even this morning, there's a report that 10% of women are saying that they're coerced into activities that they didn't want to sexually. Now, does that mean that we say 10%? Huge number. That's the entire society. Can we just go and say the British society? That would be very unfair. If this was, I tell you something, you know, I know Pakistanis, everybody can just slap Pakistanis around. If it was the Jewish communities or the Irish communities or another community, I mean, just look at Transparency International and the figures of corruption. In India, there's corruption. There's corruption in Africa. There's corruption and there are 190 odd presence of people from these different countries in this beautiful island. But why didn't he mention anyone else? Well, yes, there was a problem in the Conservative Party in Slough.
Well, let's see whether Rabia Bhatti wants to back in on that. I mean, Lord Ahmed is saying he wasn't taken out of context. It was clear what he was saying, and it's offensive.
Well, again, look, I understand that people take those comments to be offensive, and hence why they've provoked outrage, and perhaps rightly so. You know, he did say the Pakistani community, something which he's apologised for. But is that to say that Dominic harbours, you know, prejudice against the Pakistani community when he's dedicated his entire life into building these bridges?
When he's so responsible, he's the attorney, he's the highest officer of law in this country. If he has that sort of feeling, can you trust that man in his job? I think he ought to be sacked. And I honestly think those British Pakistanis and those who can sympathise with them watching your programme, they ought to write to their MPs and ask the Prime Minister to sack him, because you cannot have a responsible person like the Attorney General to be expressing his views and generalising.
He has apologised.
That's fine, but do we accept the apology? I don't think people should.
I think people make mistakes all the time, and I think talking.
I make mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I'm not in position of power. I'm not in a government. I'm not the Attorney General. You can make a mistake, but when you are in government, you make mistake, then you have to leave. You have to go. You remember the Plubgate issue. It's just one word, even though it was taken out of context, and he had to resign. So why not on this particular issue when you've actually demonized the entire community?
Well, actually, if you want to come back in.
I would totally support what Lord Nazir is trying to point out. Does it mean, being Attorney General, does it mean that this segment of society, Pakistani society, will be deprived of the due process of law because they've already been accused of being corrupt? Does it mean that everybody who will come to the courts or raise the issue on any point of law, this Attorney General has a prejudice views about this particular community already? So we have already been deprived of our legal rights. This has been what have been perceived by our community.
But do you agree with Lord Ahmed that he should resign?
Absolutely. I think he lost his neutrality. He does not have the favour of all the communities. He should be a neutral person. He should stay away from a political statement like this. But I would point one more thing.
Prejudicial, in fact, not political.
Let's give Mohammed Amin a chance, because he represents the Conservative Muslim Forum. I mean, Mohammed, you've heard what two people here have said, that Dominic Grieve should now resign. What do you say to that?
I think Lord Nazir Ahmed's reaction is the sort of reaction you sometimes get with political opponents trying to blow storms in a teacup, make mountains out of them, to mix a few metaphors. Of course he shouldn't resign. He's not the first person to go slightly astray in an interview. He won't be the last person.
So you mean we can now forget about it?
Sajid Karim accepted the apology on the day. I didn't even feel an apology was needed, but I'm happy to have him correct what he said, and now we move on.
So sadly, we have people like Mr. Amin and others who are defending someone who outrightly criticized and not only demonized the entire community. I cannot believe it for the life of me that this actually shows that what Conservative Party... Look, I don't belong to any political party, so it's not political opponent as such. I do not belong to any political party. I am a member of a community that has been offended. I'm sorry, but people with responsibility, I'm sorry, people with the highest office should be very careful with their words.
He did say he is apologising for any offence that was caused. So
any offence. Of course he caused an offence. So, why any offence? He caused an offence. So, when people make mistakes at this such a highest position of power, then they need to go, I'm afraid, and you need to get new ones.
I think
to have confidence.
I was just going to add one more thing, that justice is not just been about getting the justice done. It should be perceived as well. And I think the segment of the society feels that there's a certain mentality that's growing day by day within the Conservative Party, maybe in their coalition government. I'm not sure about that, but there's very prominent, signs we can see. David Cameron has, gave a very responsible comment, but we can't blame him. He's a PM.
Irresponsible or irresponsible?
Irresponsible comments about Pakistani community, that they are terrorists. In fact, and this was raised by Pakistani community at that forum. Obviously, we can sort him out in general election, but what about Attorney General? He's a man of law. He's the man who will be giving justice or correcting the systems within the justice system to ensure that every person who, no matter what color, race or religion he belongs to, he should be perceived as equal citizen of the society. I just want to add one more thing. The way this news been timed is absolutely, we have to look at it. There was a huge protest of anti-drone was going on at the same day. This was about the rights of Pakistani being droned within the far-flung areas of Pakistan, where the eye of the camera cannot reach, where international media have been deprived to get their facts and figures right from the battlegrounds. But still, this news was published on the same day that the certain community who's struggling to get their voice heard is absolutely corrupt and fraud. So you're telling the community, no matter how much they scream and yell, don't pay any attention towards them. They already have done their part of the community.
Well, on that note, we'll have to end this section. We're coming back to the same issue after the break, but we're trying to look at the wider question of whether all the mainstream parties are now failing the ethnic minorities and beginning to lose their support. Stay with us.